Hi, I'm Stuart from LeaseSpec, and I want to go through and show you some of the fixes and the changes that we made on this S15. In the previous video, I went through and kind of explained some of what we were running into. I explained that there was an oiling issue, there was some things that weren't done quite right in the cooling system, and some other stuff that the customer wanted fabricated. So I will go through now and kind of walk you through all the changes that I made, my thought process. I have some footage of some of the welding. When I'm in the middle of working, it's kind of tough for me to want to just stop and record, but I'm trying to get better about that so that I can kind of show you guys some of my work in progress. So let's go ahead and start with the cooling system since the car is on the ground, and then we'll take a look under the car here in a second. The first thing that I had mentioned was the previous cooling system. Actually, I could show you right here. This was the can that was previously in this spot. And it was used as what I like to call a header tank. So a header tank is kind of a higher fill point for the system. You could see that the radiator cap had a home here because the radiator, the tucked radiator, as it's installed, does not have a filler cap. So what you do in that particular instance is you typically run a tank at a higher spot. Some people will weld them onto the inlet elbows of the motor, and you'll kind of see that. That's a very common theme over on Australian builds. And some people will run them remote mounted like this as well. Some shops in Australia do it. Some companies like HPI and ARC will actually sell side flow radiators with these tanks in mind, and I'll kind of go through and explain why. They give it a good bleed point and a high point and a good fill point. The reason that's important is because the RB26 happens to run coolant all the way through this mid-manifold, and then you have what was typically a bleed spot right here. In relation to where the radiator sits, you'll actually notice, and it's kind of tough without seeing it at like eye level, but you'll actually notice that this kind of sits a little bit high. So what you do is you either jack the front end of the car up, or you loosen this bolt, and as you fill it, you'll get to the point where coolant comes here, and then you shut the bolt and you tighten it and you're good to go. With the way that I design my systems, I actually purchase adapters so that this spot, as coolant and most likely air makes its way up here, it's going to feed over here to a tank that sits higher than this location. What that's going to do is it's going to naturally bleed and purge the air out of the system and start getting rid of all of the, it'll kind of become a self-maintaining system. Now, the reason that you see this line coming from the radiator is for the exact same option, or the exact same reason, rather. I'll show you a picture because it's kind of tough to see, but I've done a swivel banjo fitting underneath here, and I particularly welded it at the highest point of the radiator so that nothing can get caught in these side-to-side fins or the tops of these end tanks. This will also actively bleed to this can, meaning that all the air from the original bleed bolt, all the air from the radiator will come here, and this can empties itself with a -8 that's on the lower side of the radiator, so it has a pull, it has a suction from the water pump. The next thing that I did, this tank had a misthreaded barb fitting on it, which is another reason why we redid it. So the coolant overflow system was not actually there, it wasn't fabricated. So I built a coolant overflow tank here. It's fed from the cap just like any normal radiator would be. So this will be for non-pressurized coolant. This is all the excess, just a standard overflow, works just like a factory car. The other big issue, if you remember from the previous video, was we were only venting one valve cover, and we were venting it to a can over on the side. That worked just for driving and getting around, but everybody that knows RBs know that they love to breathe, and they know that venting both valve covers is extremely important. And when you're venting to atmosphere, having as much flow without back pressure as possible is kind of the name of the game, while also cleaning the air. So because of this, we don't just do boxes with fittings on them and maybe just a little bit of packing inside of it. We kind of do everything that we can to make sure that there's a lot of filtration so that the air coming out of this system is as clean as possible and you're not getting a lot of vapors and nasty stuff coming out of the engine bay. So what I did was I built this catch can into a spot that has a lot of restrictions to it. And you'll actually see what I'm talking about here in a second. The way that this hood cable was routed, it was actually tucked up above the wheel for clearance issues. You'll see that I can't really move that very much, and I'm not rebuilding a hood latch cable. So I put an indention in the can so that I had clearance for it. And I put another indention in the can so that I had clearance for the cold pipe. This isn't really something that I'm ever going to offer for another car because it's very specifically built for this one. But once it's in there, you'll see that it clears and avoids everything in the area. In addition to that, you'll also see that this is a triple stage baffle setup. The inside of the can is chambered, so everything that comes in through those fittings has to go down into the base. All of the mesh and the packing material is then gonna be serviceable. I did that because this car runs ethanol, and ethanol kind of tends to get real nasty as far as the byproducts that come out of it and everything else. So I figured if this ever got real bad or real gunked up, it's very important for the user to be able to take apart the catch can, reach in, clean out the packing, make sure everything's good. And then after that, what I do is I have a thicker mesh baffle pack that bolts in right here. Once this is powder coated, I'll nutsert all of this, but this will bolt in right here. And then for one final stage of cleaning, I like to use these K&N panel filters. It kind of goes into the packing like that. Nameplate holds it all down, and that's the catch can. There's a drain on the bottom. In this particular application, the customer won't be returning down to the motor, but if they did want to, it's a 1/2 inch NPT. You can kind of do whatever you want from that. You could either just put a plug in there. You could put a little fitting with like an elbow, kind of point down to the bottom of the car with some silicone hose and use like a drain valve so you can just kind of constantly drain the catch can, because regardless of how good you build it or whatever you do for baffling, you're probably still gonna get some trash in there. So that's what I did inside the engine bay currently. All of this is gonna be sent off for powder coat. None of it's gonna be left raw. That's why some of it has a little bit of scratches on it and stuff like that. It'll all get cleaned up. Let me go ahead and jack the car up, and I will show you guys the oil pan that we did for it. Okay, and here we are under the car. Not a lot has changed. It kind of looks a lot like before, but let me explain to you what it is that I did on this extension that's a little bit different than some of the others. So when I had originally explained what I was doing when I was measuring for my clearances, this is what I was talking about. You can actually see that these motor mount cups on this R33 subframe sit forward pretty aggressive, unlike a GTR. It's very unfortunate because in a perfect world, what I wanted for these extensions to just go straight out and give me a lot of depth. So what I did instead was I actually just made them a lot taller than I make most of my units. That way I kind of get as much oil capacity as I can out of what I'm given within the space in the engine bay. It's not installed right now, but we do have good clearance on the sway bar. That's been double checked, and the pan has been pressure tested at 25 PSI. I leak checked it continuously because we originally had a leak over on the plug hole from where the differential was. Obviously, you'll notice this is an aluminum pan, so this was an RB26 all-wheel drive pan from the beginning. The differential was lopped off. This was welded shut, but there was a couple of pinholes, so I had to pressurize it, find the pinholes, and just kind of go through, weld it, put a new plate on, got everything start to finish good to go. I think it turned out pretty good. It's got some pretty good capacity. It probably adds maybe a little bit more than my standard GTR units, and this should be plenty of oil for the horsepower goals of this car and what he's doing with the car. There's probably going to be some more stuff in the future. I think I had mentioned to this owner that there might be a good reason to revisit the fans. I feel like personally these fans may be a little bit underpowered, and now that we're going to kind of see what the cooling system is actually doing, now that we're not getting false readings and no air pockets, it might be something that needs to be upgraded, or the cooling system could work so efficiently now that it's got more capacity, which could end up as less oil temperature, which in exchange will help the RB, as the RB is a predominantly oil-cooled motor. So we'll see how everything goes. I think it's going to be just fine for now, but as far as room for improvement goes, I think the fans would be the next thing that if it were me, I would kind of attack on this car. But for now, I think it's going to work great. It's going to be a great street car. It'll be a good cruiser. That wraps up this project. I'm gonna get some of this stuff off to powder coat tomorrow, and before it's gone, I'll make sure and grab some pictures of the car completed. I'll post this up on my Instagram if you wanna check that out, and I might do a small little blurb about it before it leaves the shop, because it will be staying here until Texas 2K when we meet up with the Motive DVD guys for, I think we're doing a Skyline meet after that event, which should be pretty cool. So I'll have some footage and some coverage from that. I'll get some more footage of this thing rolling on the road. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start on some of the front end work on the R34 Gtr. I'm gonna kind of show you guys some fabrication today because I've been doing a really bad job about getting coverage of that while I'm in the the heat of doing it. So I'm just gonna try to make it a point to incorporate that in my videos as much as possible moving forward. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started. And now on to part 2 of today's video. This one's gonna be a little bit of a long one, but as I had mentioned earlier, I wanna make it a point to share a lot of my fabrication and stuff with you guys, not just the finished product, because it's my understanding that some of the fun is seeing the welding and seeing the processes that I go through. So without babbling on about it too much, I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys what I'm doing on the R34 today. So for starters, you'll notice the Z-Tune style dry carbon fender is on, and it's on for a reason. Actually, if you guys want to check it out before I take it off, I'll show you why it's on. It's on because I needed to use it to make sure that I had clearance for the product that I'm about to show you more in depth up here. What this is it's a structural brace that kind of takes strength back from around the door jamb area and feeds it back up to the strut tower. What that does is it essentially just kind of helps keep the strut tower located, and it minimizes a lot of flex in the weaker areas of the front end. This is obviously a full track car, so we are not concerned with too much rigidity, and actually adding as much rigidity as possible is kind of the name of the game in this instance. So this is the solution that I've come up with. I've used 1-inch chromoly tubing, and I have welded these base plates to the car in the 3 areas that I particularly wanted to triangulate strength on. I made sure to kind of stay near the door jambs because that's where the metal doubles up and it's pretty thick and stout in these areas. Basically just tubular reinforced and made the full structure and kind of gave as much strength back to the strut tower as possible. If you look on the other side, you'll also see that Russell did an incredible job of adding the roll cage bars through the firewall and to the strut tower, and then I've obviously stitch welded it as well. So there might be a few of you that say this is kind of overkill. You might not be wrong, but this is what me and the customer wanted to do on this project, and this is the direction we took. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of walk you through the steps that I took to build this, but I'm gonna show you all of them, and I'm gonna do it on the other side and kind of repeat it, and that way you can see the construction process from start to finish. So let's get started. Okay, so this time, compared to the first time I built it, I have brought cheat codes with me. I went ahead and templated all the base plates to save me time for round 2. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut these templates so that I can locate them. And then we'll start building the tube bases for the connecting structure. And then we will start fitting everything together and notching all the tubes and go from there. Okay, so because I've already done this on the other side, I already know the locations for my base plates. I've gone through, I've primed them, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna expose a little bit of the OEM primer to the bare steel so that I can weld on the base plates and start using the tube bases and locate and measure out the distance that I need to cut for the tubes. So I'm gonna go ahead and grind down one of these welds so the plate can sit flush, and then grind back some of the primer so that I've got a good weldable platform. All right, so what I've already done is I've pre-primed the back of these. Some of the primer will burn away. That's just kind of naturally part of it. But I did what I could to make sure that everything had as much of a shot as possible of having some sort of waterproof. So I'm gonna arrange it in the same spot that I did the last one, and all I'm gonna do is just tack it into place real quick. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to make sure that I've got this little crevice between the door hinge embossment and the panel, so I can grab onto it a little bit, and then I know that this weld right here is gonna have a good amount of strength. This is mostly gonna be giving strength back to the weaker sheet metal, and then I do the same thing here. I made sure that I grab the crevice, and then this will just kind of give strength back to the upper apron. For now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna locate the tube ends. I'll use magnets to make sure that everything stays where it needs to, and I'm gonna start making the connectors. I'll take this off with the connecting tubes and I'll TIG weld that on the bench, and then I'll MIG weld everything back together. I'll give this a nice good stitch on every one of these plates so that we can give strength back to the weaker sheet metal and get the reinforcement from the door hinge, the thicker panels, and that way these have a nice weld appearance and not a whole lot of MIG weld buildup, because MIG welding is not always the most beautiful thing unless you're Steve from SR, because that's all that man does. Loves him some MIG welding. So I'm gonna go ahead and start by taking some measurements and building the connecting tubes and getting this all set up and lined up. I can probably go up just a little. Okay, I think that this fit is pretty good. I like all of this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to temporarily bolt on this fender. Let's check and make sure everything is playing nicely. Perfect. Okay, so if you look up you'll kind of get an idea of what it is that I'm looking at. You can see that there is a little bit of clearance in how I coped the tube between the skin of the fender and the actual tube cope. Back here I have a lot of room. It doesn't matter what I do back here. I have plenty of room for the standoffs or whatever else I want to do. But up there, that one particular spot gets close, and I want to make sure that it not only hits, but there is a gap so that this fender, probably not ever going to have to move, but God forbid if it did, there's not just an instant break point on the actual node. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this off now, mark everything, get it tack welded, and start TIG welding it on the table. And then part of the reason why I weld these on the table and why I'll weld the third one on the table is because otherwise there'd be no way to get to the back side of this. So I like to make sure that these joints are welded all the way around, and then I'll place it onto those plates, and then I'll MIG weld it onto the car. So that's where we need to hit. Okay. Okay, so now that everything's tacked, or rather the bottom is tacked, I've welded these two all the way around. I've got these tacked to the base plates, and I did that for a reason. And then I went ahead and tacked these connections as good as I could. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and break these two tacks, tear this off, and I'm gonna go weld this cope and this cope on the table and come back and then MIG weld all of this together. Maybe I should calm down until it's like done, but I'm very excited. Okay, that wraps up this project. So as you saw earlier, I've already done the other side. I wanted to take you guys on the steps that I did to build it. So this is the completed project. I still have some more stuff that I'm gonna do on the front of the car. I still need to finish stitch welding. I still need to get the core support back on. I still need to shave the core support. I'm still gonna do some modifications around the brake master cylinders. I'm gonna do my best to keep up to date and take footage of everything, at least a little bit of B-roll, give you guys some insight as to my fabrication. If you liked this, if you liked this style of video, and if you want more of this, please let me know. That way I know how to kind of better cater my videos to what it is that y'all wanna see. If you don't wanna see this, if you just kind of are more into it for the explanations, that's cool too. I would love to hear about it. Just please feel free to let me know. It really helps me as I'm kind of just getting started with this, and I wanna know what direction it is that I should be heading in. So anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to me babble and ramble on. I hope you guys enjoyed the S15. I'm really excited to get some finished shots of it so you guys can see it all powder coated and nicely together. If you're in the area, it's gonna be at Texas 2K as well as my R34. We're gonna be going there for the Skyline meet that's hosted by Motive DVD, and I believe Herman from PRP is gonna be there. Mickey from Throttle is gonna be there. It should be a really cool time. Anyways, the S15 is gonna be there if you wanna check out some of the fabrication work in person. Hope to see you out there. Hope to hear from you in the comments and everything else. So anyways, take care, and I will do another video on this as well as some of the other upcoming projects shortly. Thanks for watching.